Thank you for your time today and welcome to our today's discussion. The main objective of this discussion is to understand how organizations normally implement information security. And we normally have different approaches. And just a recap from our previous lecture is that we usually have two types of approaches in implementing information security. There is usually what we call the bottom-up approach, whereby information security is implemented from the technical level and then moved upwards. And we said that in the bottom-up approach, there is always the advantage of that information security that you are using. You are going to find the people who are implementing it or the people who are dealing with it are people who have the skill and the expertise to handle those intricate security concerns. Some of the concerns are going to be technical, such as hacking or unauthorized access and whatever kind of issue that is happening within the organization. So when you are using the bottom-up approach, that is the kind of benefit you are trying to look for, in that these people are going to have all the training and industry insight that is needed to account for the company's unique situation. And when they are handling it from bottom up here, they are handling it from the perspective of expertise. They already know what it is they are dealing with. So that is the main advantage of the bottom-up approach, where you will start with a single staff member, maybe identifying what the problem is, like if it is a cybersecurity engineer or another expert who doesn't hold a top-level management position, and this person's responsibility will be to protect the organization-wide data with using their education, their training, their experience, or expertise. So that is the main benefit of using the bottom up approach. But we said that even in the bottom up approach, there is always the challenge that if there isn't organizational support or the main management level employees do not have not given the support that is required for this approach, sometimes it may lack budget, it may lack the organization wide acceptance, or it is something which is being done department wise, and that may bring some problems in the future, of which we already discussed that. Then the other approach we normally talk about is the top down approach. And in the top down approach is where the security approach begins with the upper management. And when it begins with the upper management, the top level managers are the ones who are responsible for initiating, creating, and implementing the data protection strategy. That is, they create the policy, like we discussed in our previous class. So there is the aspect of creating the policy, and then they are going to bring about the procedural instructions, something you will find with the maybe the VP networks, the VP systems, the chief information security officer. These are the people. So at the top level is the CEO, and then the CEO is deputized by the chief information officer, the chief operating officer, and maybe the chief finance officer, because these information security policies may require that they are financed. Then below them, you're going to find these people who have different expertise, like chief information security officer, the VP systems, and VP networks. So these people will come up with the procedural instructions and escalation plans. If something happens, how is it going to be escalated to the next level? And then they may seek, these people may also seek outside assistance in terms of training or working partnerships with professional information security providers. Because sometimes you could be talking about companies that are going to provide things like firewalls. You could be talking about companies that are going to be providing maybe VPNs, and all of that can be done in conjunction with these employees at this level. So they are also going to utilize within the organization. You find that there are also experts, and these people at the top management level, they are going to utilize these experts within the company so that they can provide the security management that is required, because they also have the technical capability of maybe providing access lists, providing access level authorizations, and that is going to be the best approach. We said we normally take this approach because at least it has the organization management support. And once it has the organization management support, it means that funding is provided for, and also cascading the security policy across the organization is going to be easy, and also managing how the security is implemented is going to be easy. So that is why we say that the approach will look at each department in terms of benefits, is that it will look at each department and its data, and then explore how it is going to be connected to find vulnerabilities. Managers have the authority to issue company-wide instructions, and still allowing each part or each person to play an integral part in keeping the data safe. And then when it is compared to an individual or a department, a management-based approach is going to incorporate more available resources and will have a clearer overview of the company's assets and concerns. So here, when you compare with this one, whereby it is just maybe the security guy who has identified a problem, and then they are going to try to explain to everybody, compare that with the approach whereby the top level managers already know that there could be a problem, and once it is identified, this is how it is going to be cascaded. Now, that is where the smooth information distribution comes in, and it makes it for management to work with everybody within the organization. We also say that the top-down approach generally has more lasting power and efficacy than the bottom-up approach, because it makes data protection a company-wide priority instead of placing all the responsibility on one person or a team. So this responsibility is not going to be the tech guy, but it is a team of employees who are going to take care. Data vulnerabilities usually exist in all the offices and departments. So each situation is going to be unique. And the only way for an information security program to work is by getting every manager, every branch. That is why we are putting different departments here, that every branch, every department and employee in agreement with the company-wide plan. That is what we said, that once the policy is created, is going to be cascaded, and we said that there could be several approaches whereby you could talk of one document, but then it is broken down into different departments so that each department may be able to take what is specific for them and they use it up. So that is basically a summary of what we had been looking at, but I will send you back to that lecture, look at it, and maybe remind yourselves. But now today, we want to look at the approach of information security implementation. And for the sake of what we expect to accomplish, we are going to ensure that by the end of the course that you can be able to explain the organizational approaches to information security. You can also be able to list and describe the functional components of an information security program. You can also determine how to plan and staff an organization's information security program based on its size, because organizations are going to be different in terms of size. You can also evaluate the internal and external factors that influence the activities and organization of the information security program. We will also make sure that you can be able to list and describe the typical job titles and functions performed in the information security program. And at the end of the whole lecture, you can be able to describe the components of a security education, training, and awareness program, and also be able to explain how organizations create and manage these programs. So that is what we wanted to accomplish. And as an introduction, we normally talk about the information security program. And what exactly does it mean? When we are talking about the information security program, we are just looking at the structure and organization of the effort that contains risks to the information assets of the organization. So on one side, we would be having the risks that are going to be available, or risks that the information assets can be exposed to. And mostly you will find that most of the risks we normally talk about, if I may be able to describe them, one of them is what we call unauthorized access to the information assets. The other one is loss or theft, and the other one is information changes. If you look at what we have just described, or what I have just listed there, it closely ties to the three pillars of security, of cybersecurity, which we normally talk about in terms of confidentiality, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So basically, these are the three things we are still looking at, and we want to ensure that they are going to be adhered to, because those are the main risks we normally look at when we are talking about information assets. And when we talk about information assets, what exactly do we mean when we are looking at information assets in an organization? Information assets will be talking about the data that is usually generated or data that is captured. So information assets will be basically data that is usually captured within the organization. And so, if we could maybe contextualize it, imagine that it is a supermarket. So, it is going to contain data about the sales, what they have sold for the day, or if it is like a PR company or a marketing company, it is going to contain data of what is the market share, what are the potential clients, and how they are going to reach them. So, that is the first aspect of the data. Then there will also be the data that is stored. So we could be talking about data in storage. Then we could also be talking about data in transmission. Sorry, there was some delay. Sorry for that. So we can continue with the discussion. And we were talking about data in storage, data in transmission, as well as processed information. Processed information. So when we are looking at the information security program, those are the aspects we are looking at in terms of information assets. And it can be applied in any organization in whatever way we are looking at. But mostly we are looking at these three aspects. So when we are talking about unauthorized access, what exactly do we mean? If we could basically just look at them in a quick explanation, when we are talking about an authorized access, here we are talking about data breaches, which are normally caused by accidents, as well as intentional motives. When we are looking at loss or theft, then we are talking about protecting against protecting against unexpected disasters, expected disasters. So here we could be talking about weather, fire, and also theft, which is intentional and criminal. And then when we are talking about information changes, we are looking at it in terms of ensuring that data remains in its original unaltered state, and it's not accidentally, maliciously altered. So that is what we mean. So these are the three aspects we are looking at when we are trying to understand about the different approaches. That is basically what we are looking at. So how do we organize for security? So variables which are involved in structuring the information security program are going to be the organizational culture, the organization size, security personnel and budget, as well as security capital budget. That is why the top-down approach was important, because you will need the personnel, you will also need the budget for the infrastructure. So as organizations increase in size, their security departments are not keeping up with the complex organizational structures. Increasing in size, you could be talking about the organization growing, also the departments growing, more employees being hired. And when that is happening, it also needs to connect to how the security program should be growing. Also, the organizational culture might change, because when you bring more employees or new personnel into the organization, It means that you will need to also train them. You will need for them to adapt to the new, to the organizational culture that is existing. And sometimes that involves what we call finances. So that finance is also tied to the security. If the organizational culture is not checked, then it might change with time. And when it changes, then it means that you may not have proper grasp of what is happening, and that may bring problems as you continue with the organization. So, information security departments tend to form the internal groups. So those internal groups are the ones that are going to look at the short-term and long-term challenges, so that when we are looking at short-term challenges, we are looking at the day-to-day operations, maybe updating of passwords, updating of the antivirus programs within machines, updating your devices so that they are protected at every day. And then in terms of long-term plans, you're also looking at how the information security is weighed down and how it needs to be revamped in terms of infrastructure. You could be talking about buying new servers, buying new firewall systems, and such. So that is where the information security department comes in. And then those functions can be divided into groups. That is why in the first picture, we showed that there could be those who are dealing with the systems themselves. There are those who could deal with the operating systems themselves. There are those who could deal with the networks. So that each of those components is dealt with thoroughly. Then if we are talking about very large organizations, and here we are looking at organizations that have like 10,000 computers and upward, then security budgets all normally grow very fast, because for this number of computers, it means if it is the antivirus licenses, they are going to be many, and you will need to pay more. So that budget is definitely, it has to grow very fast. And then even with those large budgets, then the average amount that is spent is going to be smaller than any other type of organization. Why? Because these organizations, you can also have what we call group policies. And with group policies, it is very easy to have one policy or one solution covering many machines. But what we are saying is that a third of the organization incidences should be handled by the large organizations and their setups within that organization. Also, it is very important when you are developing that security policy for those organizations to ensure that you are able to identify the sensitive information and what are the critical systems. That is number one. You have to know what is the sensitive information, because there could be so many uh, information or large amounts of information, but you need to know what is the sensitive information and what are the critical systems, because you will realize that you could be having several routers, you could be having, for such number of machines, you are talking about maybe they are networked. So think of routers, switches, and the firewalls that you have. Those components are very critical, because if one goes down, it means a section of users might be affected. So that is why we are saying you need to identify what is the sensitive information and what are the critical systems. Then you also need to incorporate the local, state, and also country laws, as well as the ethical standards. What are the ethical standards of usage? Then you need to also define the institutional security goals. So that is where training comes in very seriously. And also you need to set a course for accomplishing those goals and objectives. So in large organizations, those are the 4 items you need to look at. If I could just itemize them, I could talk about maybe number one, identify sensitive information and critical systems. And we have talked about the routers, switches, firewalls, servers. All of those are critical systems which you need to put into a lot of consideration. Then you need to incorporate. You need to incorporate local and country laws as well as medical standards. Number three, need to define the organization goals and objectives. And this is very important because if you don't know what is the goal of this organization in the industry that it is operating, then you will have a challenge. Then you need to set a course for accomplishing the set goals and objectives. So those are the main items you need to look at. Then, in large organizations, we have started with very large organizations. In large organizations, the most important thing you need to make sure is that what are the vast number of computers in use, often involved. So you want to see, yes, you're talking about those organizations that have between 1,000 and 10,000 computers. You want to be sure at any given time, what is the maximum number of computers in use? How many users are using the systems that we have in place so that you can be able to have the proportionate number of security policy in work. And this one, we are also looking at it in terms of integrating and planning a policy into the organization's culture. And we said in our previous class that the organization culture needs to be set around the security programs. So there are separate functions which are divided into 4 areas in large organizations. When you are looking at security policy, you want to ensure that the first area is that what are the functions performed by non-technology business units, those which are outside the IT departments. You also need to determine the functions that are performed by IT groups outside the information security area, then the functions performed within the information security department, and then the functions that are performed within the information security department as compliance. There are those which are like customer service, like somebody is asking that they forgot their password or their password has expired or their domain is also expired. How are they, that is customer service on how you are going to maybe create a new password for them, also maybe connect them to a printer and something like that. But there is also compliance, meaning that they need to put in the proper password, it needs to have some security features and so on. Then when you are looking at the security also, this is where the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, has the responsibility for information security functions, just like we have listed them previously. So the Chief Information Security Officer should be adequately equipped with skills to manage those functions. And there's going to be full-time security personnel whereby they are looking at the sensitivity of the information that is protected, the industry regulations, and maintaining profitability of the organization. And when you look at it in those large organizations, you will have maybe the Chief Information Security Officer at the top. Then you're going to have the technical security team. These are the people who can be able to configure access levels. They are able to configure the firewalls. They are able to secure the server. They are also able to analyze malicious software and within the servers, and that is it. And then we also have the risk management and policy. These are the people who are going to generate the policies. These are the people who are going to sit down and look at what are the trends within the industry, what are the threats we might be facing, and how can we create a policy that is going to ensure that the security is adhered to. So we are saying you could be having in those large organizations, you could be having like 2 full-time security managers, 3 to 4 full-time security administrators or technicians, or 3 to 4 part-time security managers, and 10 to 12 part-time security administrators and technicians. So this is just a suggestion on how you can go about that. Still in those large organizations, we can take it down now to ensure that apart from these guys we have talked about, down here, there are people who are specifically assigned to maybe the demilitarized zone, maybe to the intranet and clients. When we are talking about customer service, the clients and servers. Again, there are people when it comes to this is vulnerability assessment, malicious software, the same. We can have guys who are assigned to dealing with client issues. There are guys who are also assigned to dealing with server issues when it comes to malicious software. In terms of technical consultation, then we can have guys who have been assigned to designing the technical systems. There are also guys who are assigned to creating new infrastructure design. Also guys who are specifically assigned to the implementation of those technical solutions. Then in terms of compliance, we have guys who are assigned to risk assessment. There are guys who are assigned to risk management. And they have been shown here the number of people you can have in large organizations. Remember, we have said that large organizations are those which have between 1,000 and 10,000 computers. Then we continue in medium-sized organizations. Those are the ones, and we can relate to most of them around here, which have between 100 and 1,000 computers. So they are going to have a smaller budget. They also have same-sized security staff as the small organization, meaning that you don't have so many security personnel, and they may be large enough to implement a multi-tiered approach to security. So this is how they will look like. You will have the security manager, then the security administrator, and a security technician. Then in small organizations, this is where we are going to have between 10 and 100 computers. And these ones have a simple centralized IT organizational model because they are very few, and they do not spend a lot. That is why we are talking about disappropriation, disappropriate, dis, disproportionately more on security, meaning that they are given a very small budget because their function is intertwined with the operation of the organization. And so they are going to have very little in the way of formal policy. You may not find like a formal policy document. You may not find planning and security measures because it is something that can be done within the organization and within budget, or they can even outsource the web presence or e-commerce. So this is how they are going to look like. You'll have the security manager, the security administrator, and security technician. And if you see here, we are talking about maybe one full-time and one part-time staff member, meaning that you do not need to have them there full-time. So how do we place this information security? In terms of large organization, then the information security policy is going to be headed by the chief information security officer. And within that department, you are going to have this guy is going to report directly to the top or to the chief executive officer or the chief information officer. And then You're going to have, this is the guy who's running the whole IT department, but since the goals and objectives of the CIO and the CISO may have in conflict, then one can report to the other, and mostly it is the CISO who reports to the CIO. So this is how it would look like. The CEO, and then the audit committee, then the information security management committee at the top there. But they are also having the legal departments, internal audit, human resources. All of these are people who sit at the board. And the chief information security officer or the information security technology management is going to be connected directly to this committee, so that as much as it's at this lower level, it can always connect to the top management level. That is why this line is dotted, meaning that this guy still needs to manage this team and report to the the chief information officer, but at the same time, he has access to the top management level. What are the benefits, or what are the pros? This is the widespread use of the pattern, or that is the laid down operation, because you do not need to have a long chain of command. So it has been like the tradition, meaning that you need to report to the top boss, and that means you are close to the CEO. You always work within the IT department, and there is always this challenge of conflict of interest when you are looking at it in terms of challenges. And also, security is not just a technological issue, it is also a management issue. That is why it looks like this. Again, security coming up there to where the CEO is. So, and the pros and cons have been listed there. And this is how the organization is set up, and also the pros and cons. So you can look at this because they always talk about the same thing. Then let us look at the components of the security program. An organization information security needs are going to be unique in terms of the organization culture, in terms of the organization size, in terms of budget. Like we have seen, there are small organizations, large organizations, and very large organizations. So determining what level of the information security program is going to be determined, or is going to be guided by the vision and mission of the organization, and also the documents that are going to be formulated in line to the mission statement of the organization. And this is how it looks like. There will be an external security consultant who works together with the committee that has been created, or the security manager who is reports to the chief information security officer, or the chief security officer. So these are going to work and create a committee that is going to ensure that you come up with a very good policy. And these are the people we are talking about here. How do you implement security education, training, and awareness programs, or what we call the SETA program? It is designed to reduce accidental security breaches. It consists of three elements: security education, security training, and security awareness. So, why do we need it? One is to improve employee behavior in terms of security, and also enable the organization to hold employees accountable for their actions. If you don't have a policy, when there is a security breach, you will not be able to accuse somebody of misbehaving or not following policy. So that is why you need it. How do you implement this setup program? You implement it by providing, or by building in-depth knowledge to design, implement, or operate security programs for organizations and systems. It is done by developing skills and knowledge so that computer users can perform their jobs while using IT systems more securely, and by improving awareness of the need to protect system resources. So it is going to ensure, or it is meant to ensure, that necessary mechanisms for accomplishing the set mission are going to be followed, or they are going to be put in place, and they will be followed. So, for example, if we talk about somebody needs an encryption software, for when they are transmitting. Once you talk about that, they understand what is encryption and what is this encryption software and how they are going to use it. So that is how we are talking about it. And the SETA programs are going to be put in different levels. So there is going to be the level of education, there is going to be the level of training, the level of awareness. So when we are talking about education, we are asking why. Training is how do we do it? Then awareness is what needs to be done. So the level here is in education, we are providing insight, like giving an understanding. That is what is being said here. Training, you are giving people knowledge or giving them the skill that they need to do that thing you are talking about. And then awareness is the information or the recognition of what you are protecting. So let's talk about the teaching method, whereby here it could be theoretical or a discussion seminar or background reading, giving somebody a book or some journal to look at so that they have a background understanding. Then, in terms of training, you're going to put across the practical instruction. Like there is going to be a lecture, there is going to be a case study, and hands on practice, like showing them this is where you click, this is how you configure, something like that. In awareness, you're going to give maybe media videos, newsletters, and posters so that people, when they look at it, they can remember. Like you record a video of the training, and somebody can watch that video maybe after some time to remind themselves or to have the awareness that they need. How do you test that this SETA program is working? One, you can give an essay in terms of education so that people can give, like they can do a critique or a summary of what they have learned. And then in terms of training, you can apply what you have learned by solving a particular program. Maybe you trained people on maybe the importance of having access lists in an organization, which websites to allow and which websites not to allow. And then here you're going to ask them to actually configure that access list. And then here in terms of awareness, you can identify the learning itself by putting across a multiple choice quiz so that people can remind themselves. And then the impact time frame. In terms of education, it is normally long term. In training, it is intermediate, meaning that training can be learned and then people can forget after some time. That is why you need awareness, which is short term, so that they can remind themselves. So that is how the SETA program is implemented. Then, in terms of security education, we normally talk about employees within the information security having the needing to be encouraged to seek for formal education, and they need also to be done that based on their background experience. And a number of institutions of higher learning, including colleges and universities, have such programs. And this is how the security education will be carried out. Like if it is an information security officer, is going to be the CISO and the kind of knowledge areas which they need. So look at this diagram and maybe you'll be able to understand what kind of knowledge area you need to acquire when you are being called maybe a network admin, a firewall analyst, a system admin, or maybe an information security manager, the kind of training that you need and the kind of skill that you are going to have mastery about. Then the security training is going to involve providing detailed information and hands-on instruction in order to develop user skills to perform the duties that you have been given securely. And it is developed in terms of customized training, or it is going to be outsourced. So how is it going to be customized for different users? One is by the functional background, maybe a general manager or a general user, a managerial user, and a technical user. These people are going to have different functional backgrounds. A general user, maybe the basic functions. A managerial user, maybe they have access to more sensitive information. A technical user, they have the understanding of configuring the system and maybe understanding how the system works. So they are going to be trained differently because of the skill level. General user could be a novice. A managerial user could be could be having intermediate skill level, and a technical user could be having what we call advanced skill level. So when we come to the security awareness, one of the least frequently implemented, because awareness, like we have said, is going to be short term, sometimes it is not implemented as it should be or regularly as it should be implemented, because this sometimes it seems like it is not important, but like we can see here, it is going to set the stage for training, and it is also going to remind users of the procedures to be followed. That is why it is very important. And also, security awareness is going to, if you want it to work, you need to refrain from using technical jargon, define the learning objectives, keep things light, don't overload users, help users to understand their roles in information security, and utilize in-house communication media, as well as making the awareness program more formal and providing good information early rather than perfect information late. When we are also talking about security awareness, effective, if you want it to work, then it needs to make employees accountable for their actions. You also need to disseminate it and enforce the policy. When you are talking about disseminating, is looking at which information is important to which user, and then you can enforce that specific information to them, and then demonstrating due care and due diligence that can help indemnify the institution against lawsuits. And then in terms of security awareness, again, many security awareness programs are available at little or no cost, although others can be expensive. When we are talking about those components, it's like videos, posters and banners, lectures and conferences, and computer-based training. Some of them, like you could go on YouTube and you find a lot of information there. That is where we are saying they could be low cost. And then examples of awareness components, it could include things like newsletters, brochures, trinkets, that is coffee cups, pens, which have been labeled, and bulletin boards. And then again, in terms of security awareness, once you need to create and maintain an educational website, you need always to be updating it on what is already out there. You plan ahead, keep the page loading time to a minimum. Like it should not waste a lot of time, and then you need to seek feedback and spend time promoting the website. So the challenge is always how do you update? That is why you need to be up to date. And with that, you will be good to go. So in terms of summary, we have seen how we have introduced the different approaches we can have. We have also talked about how we organize for security, and in terms of very large organizations, medium organizations, and small organizations. We have also talked about how you place information security within the organizations. We have talked about the components of the security programs, that is the SETA, and information security laws and titles, as well as implementing the security education, training, and awareness programs. So thank you for your time, and I would like to stop there.